We were deep in the woods, the kind of place you only reach after hours of hiking through dense foliage and rocky terrain. It was the perfect spot for our camping trip, away from the world and completely isolated. As night fell, we set up our tents, built a fire, and settled in for what we hoped would be a peaceful night under the stars. Around midnight, we heard a faint rustling in the bushes. It wasn't unusual to hear animals in the forest, so we didn't think much of it. But the rustling grew louder, closer, more persistent. We exchanged uneasy glances, but tried to brush it off. "Probably just a raccoon or something," I said, though my voice betrayed my nerves. An hour later, the rustling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, pressing down on you. We were all on edge, straining our ears to catch any sound. That's when we saw it, a shadowy figure standing just beyond the reach of our firelight. "Did you see that?" Jenny whispered, her voice trembling. We all nodded, eyes wide with fear. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching us. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it toward the figure. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and bushes. The figure had vanished. We sat there, paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do. Finally, we decided to take turns keeping watch, unable to shake the feeling that we were being observed. When it was my turn, I sat by the dying fire, flashlight in hand, scanning the darkness. Hours passed without incident, and I began to relax, thinking maybe our minds had been playing tricks on us. But then, I saw it again. The figure, closer this time, just at the edge of the clearing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure seemed to be wearing old, tattered clothes, its face obscured by shadows. Slowly, it raised a hand and pointed directly at me. Panic surged through me, and I shouted, waking the others. We all scrambled out of our tents, shining flashlights in every direction. The figure was gone again. Terrified, we decided to leave immediately. We packed up in record time, abandoning our plans to stay the night. As we hiked back to civilization, the feeling of being watched never left us. The next day, exhausted and jittery, we recounted our experience to a park ranger. He listened patiently, then told us a story that sent chills down our spines. Years ago, a camper had gone missing in that very spot. Search parties never found him, and his disappearance remained a mystery. Some say his restless spirit still roams the woods, watching anyone who dares to camp there. We never went back to those woods. The memory of that silent watcher haunts me to this day, a reminder that some places are better left undisturbed. My friends and I had been planning this camping trip for months. We chose a secluded spot by a pristine lake, miles away from the nearest town. It was perfect, no cell service, no distractions, just us and nature. We set up our tents, built a fire, and spent the evening laughing and sharing stories. As the fire burned low and the night grew darker, a gentle breeze began to blow through the trees. It was a soothing sound at first, a natural lullaby. But as the wind picked up, it began to carry faint whispers. At first, we thought it was just the rustling leaves, but the whispers grew clearer, more distinct. It sounded like someone was speaking just beyond our campsite. "Do you hear that?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We all nodded, straining to make out the words. The whispers were just on the edge of comprehension, tantalizingly close but frustratingly unclear. It felt as if the wind itself was trying to communicate with us. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to follow the sound. Armed with flashlights, we ventured into the woods, the whispers guiding our way. The further we walked, the clearer the whispers became. They spoke our names, each one of us hearing our own name carried on the wind. A sense of dread settled over us as we realized we were being led somewhere. The whispers grew more urgent, almost pleading. We reached a clearing, and there, in the center, was an old, abandoned cabin. Its windows were shattered, and the door hung off its hinges, swaying in the wind. Against our better judgment, we approached the cabin. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. It felt like dozens of voices were speaking at once, a cacophony of desperation. I reached out to push the door open, and it creaked ominously as it swung inward. Inside, the air was cold and musty. The whispers echoed off the walls, swirling around us. In the center of the room was a wooden table, and on it lay an old, tattered journal. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. The writing was frantic, disjointed, filled with desperate pleas for help. The last entry sent a chill down my spine. "The wind speaks to me. It knows my name. It wants to take me away." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, and the whispers stopped. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. Panic set in as we tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows were too high and too small to climb through. We were trapped. As we huddled together, fear gripping us, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. They spoke of pain, of loss, of souls trapped in the wind. We realized with horror that we had awakened something that wanted to claim us. We spent the night in that cabin, terrified and sleepless, the whispers never ceasing. When dawn finally broke, the door creaked open on its own. We didn't hesitate. We ran back to our campsite, packed up, and left as quickly as we could. To this day, I can't hear the wind without thinking of that night. The whispers haunt me, a constant reminder of the spirits we encountered. I don't know what they wanted or why they chose us, but I do know one thing: I will never go camping again. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway, just me and my girlfriend, Emily, camping in the remote wilderness of the national park. We found a perfect spot by a crystal-clear stream, surrounded by tall pines. As the sun set, we built a campfire, roasted marshmallows, and enjoyed the serenity of the great outdoors. As night fell, we settled into our tent, lulled by the sounds of the forest. Around midnight, I woke up to the smell of smoke. Groggy, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, expecting to see our campfire smoldering. Instead, I saw another fire, about 50 yards away, flickering brightly in the darkness. "Emily, wake up," I whispered urgently, shaking her awake. "There's another campfire nearby." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Are you sure? There's no one else supposed to be out here." We both stepped out of the tent, staring at the distant flames. There was no sign of movement around the fire, no shadows or figures. Just the fire burning steadily. "Maybe we should check it out," Emily suggested, though her voice was filled with uncertainty. Grabbing our flashlights, we cautiously approached the fire. As we got closer, the air grew colder, an unnatural chill that seemed to seep into our bones. The fire looked ordinary enough, but something about it felt wrong, out of place. When we were just a few feet away, the fire suddenly extinguished itself, plunging us into darkness. Our flashlights flickered, then went out completely. Panic set in as we fumbled with them, trying to get them to work. The silence around us was absolute, oppressive. Then, we heard it, a faint humming, like someone singing a lullaby. It was soft, almost soothing, but there was an edge to it that made my skin crawl. We turned back toward our campsite, moving quickly, the humming growing louder with each step. When we reached our tent, we froze. Another fire was burning right where our campfire had been, but this one was different. The flames were a sickly green, casting eerie shadows on the trees. And around the fire stood 4 figures, holding hands, swaying gently to the rhythm of the humming. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figures didn't respond, just continued their ghostly dance. Emily clutched my arm, her grip tight with fear. Suddenly, the figures stopped swaying and turned to face us. Their eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to suck in the light. They spoke in unison, their voices a haunting chorus. "Join us." Without thinking, we turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, the humming echoing in our ears. We didn't stop until we reached the park ranger station, breathless and terrified. We told the ranger what we had seen, but he just shook his head. "You're not the first to see the Phantom Campfire," he said. "There's a legend about a group of campers who disappeared years ago. Some say their spirits are trapped, reliving their final night over and over." We left the park that morning, the memory of those hollow eyes and eerie humming burned into our minds. To this day, I can't explain what we saw, but I know one thing for sure: some campfires are best left alone.